The iPhone 15 Pro has been out for over 6 months now, and I want to give an update as to what I liked about using this phone, as well as some of the new features and kind of how they played a role in my life. And I can give you a hint, it all comes down to usability and utility, in my opinion. Now, one of the main features that's new with this phone is USB-C. It's kind of funny because Apple was forced to add this feature, yet it's probably like one of the biggest features people like and care about this phone. And USB-C is nice because so many cables, so many devices nowadays use USB-C, and it makes life a whole lot easier just using those between different devices, and now my iPhone can be one of them. There's also more things you can do with USB-C too. For example, you can plug in a hard drive, or if you need to charge something like your AirPods, for example, well, now you can go plug that into the USB-C port of this phone. USB-C isn't perfect. There are some downsides of switching to an iPhone for USB-C, and one of those has to be with upgrading all your cables. So, your cable in your car, the cable that you use as an adapter to connect this to a different device, now you have to upgrade all those cables or get adapters for them, and that part sucks. It adds a lot of extra cost, but in the long run though, it'll balance out and be worth it. Another big downside too with USB-C, and this is something I rarely hear talked about, is cleaning out the ports. So with a lightning port, it's a lot easier to clean out. You can literally take a toothpick and just kind of pick out the dust. Whereas with USB-C, it's a lot harder because you have this really fragile plastic thing in the center and it's taking up space. It just makes it a lot harder to clean the ports of these phones. But for me, USB-C has been something that I have really liked, and I'm glad Apple has actually been forced to change these phones to USB-C. Another design feature of this phone too that some people really like, some people really care about, some people don't, is the titanium frame. I definitely think it's better than stainless steel. It hides fingerprints a bit less, it's a little bit more durable, it's 30% lighter. However, I feel like Apple kind of added titanium to this as more of a marketing stunt than anything else. And as somebody who uses this phone on the daily, it's not something you're going to really care about, especially if you use this with a case. And then something that's really interesting too is the back glass on this is now more easier to replace. And beforehand, these would be fused to the chassis of the phone, and it'd be really expensive to replace the back glass. It'd be like $500 if you do it from Apple. Now it's $200 from Apple, which is still a ton of money, I think, for a back glass, but it's a lot cheaper than what it was before. And then I really want to talk about the display of this phone. I know the 120 hertz display has been out on the Pro model iPhones for a few years now, and as somebody who came from an iPhone 12, this is probably like one of the biggest, most noticeable features going to this phone. 120 hertz display refresh rates definitely make a huge difference. The first thing I noticed picking up this phone, I'll literally scroll through, the set screen, apps and stuff, and things just feel a lot smoother, a lot more responsive than what it was on like my iPhone 12 or even on the iPhone 15s. So I hope that's something Apple brings to their whole lineup in the future, because I tried switching back to my 12 for a day and I could not live without it. The always on display too is another feature of this phone that I kind of found different. The always on display looks really good when you have it set on a table and you have like a nice aesthetic wallpaper and like setup going on there, but it kind of drains battery life a bit more. So I kind of decided, should I keep it off, should I keep it on? Ultimately, I decided to keep it on just because I don't notice battery life being an issue. And it does do a thing too where if you cover the ambient light sensor, or you put it in your pocket or set it face down on a table, after a few seconds it does actually turn off the display, which helps conserve battery life. So I'm glad they have that feature, but the always on display looks cool. Some people like it, some people don't care. So just keep that in mind. Now, I know the display on this too is basically the same as the display on the 14 Pros, but the bezels on this are slightly thinner. So when you have this without a case, which I really do not recommend doing, it definitely looks a lot more sleeker and a lot more modern compared to some of the other iPhones and even other smartphones out there. And then another big feature of this phone this year as well is the action button. So I have my action button programmed to open up my Notion to-do list, and this has been really handy for me because a lot of times I kind of get off track throughout the day and I need to refocus on what I need to get done, and I can just press this little action button here. It opens up my Notion to-do list, and I can figure out what I need to do. Now, in order to do that, I did have to download the Shortcuts app and program it so it can do, certain tasks, kind of like what I was mentioning there. But there are default shortcuts you can do as well, like the mute switch, do not disturb, stuff like that you can program this action button to do. And then of course, we cannot talk about the Pro iPhones without the Pro cameras that are in these. And the 48 megapixel camera that's in this does a really good job of capturing photos and stuff if you make sure that the ProRes Max thing is unchecked. You also have to be in 1x zoom in order to get the full 48 megapixels, but if you zoom in, you still get, a higher megapixel density than 12 megapixels. The more you zoom in though, the smaller the megapixel count gets. But probably my biggest favorite thing with these cameras as well has to be the video recording features. So cinematic mode is something that I really like because I shoot a lot of B-roll with all this technology stuff that I'm filming, and being able to pull out my phone, quickly adjust the settings, and then just film my B-roll shot and airdrop it over to my computer is a lot faster and a lot easier than taking out my camera, adjusting the exposure, adjusting, the aperture and stuff to get the right, lighting in the right shot. So I really like that about this phone is for quick B-roll shots, quick videos and stuff, it does an absolutely amazing job for that. Now, while having these extra camera quality features is nice and stuff, it does take up more storage. So I kind of keep my settings on the lower end, 1080p videos, the regular 12 megapixel camera type stuff, just because I know a lot of the time I'm gonna be taking random photos or random videos of just random stuff, and that's literally what most of my photo library is, and probably what I assume most people's photo library is. It's just random things, and I don't want that taking up a ton of cloud storage. So that's what I did with this phone, and probably what you may want to do too if you get it. And then actually using this phone throughout the day, I know battery life is something a lot of people wonder. Battery life on this has been good enough. I'll start the day off with it at 100 or 95%, and then at the end of the day, it'll be around 15 to 20%. So I am a pretty heavy user of this phone. I probably use it about 4 to 5 hours a day on average, which I know is a lot, but I'll do different things too, like listening to music, scrolling through content, playing light games, and I have the always on display on, which drains things a bit faster. But battery life on this phone has never been a concern. It may be a concern 4 or 5 years down the line as the battery ages, but even 6 months in, my battery health is still at 100%. So I think battery life on this phone probably isn't going to be an issue for a very long time, if at all. And then for performance on this phone, it has the A17 Pro chip, which I feel like is really overkill, and I don't know what can push this phone to its limits. But I guess you have that extra peace of mind whenever you're playing a game or doing something that you have one of the best mobile processors in the world. So performance-wise, you're not going to probably have any issues. But overall, the iPhone 15 Pro was a good upgrade for me coming from my 12, just because I knew it had features I'd appreciate, and I knew I was going to film content stuff with this, and having those extra features was really important to me. But I am curious, what do you guys think? Is the iPhone 15 Pro a good upgrade for you? Have you made the upgrade? Have you considered getting one? Let me know. Thank you all for watching. Goodbye.